Your Honor, trash like this always blames everyone but themselves. Detective Marcus Sullivan was testifying about the night he arrested Amara Hayes for drug possession and resisting arrest. He didn't even look at her when he said it. Found this one creeping around where decent people live. Started running her mouth the second I approached. Sullivan's sneer was unmistakable. He glanced at Amara with pure disgust. Should have stayed in her own neighborhood. The words hit like slaps. The prosecutor smiled. The gallery nodded. Everyone saw exactly what Sullivan wanted them to see. Another black woman who belonged behind bars. But Amara Hayes didn't flinch. She touched her jacket lapel once, then stared at Sullivan with deadly calm. Her lawyer whispered something and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Nobody knew Amara had been hunting Sullivan for months. What she was about to reveal would destroy him completely. Have you ever been completely underestimated? Detective Sullivan, the prosecutor began, adjusting his expensive suit jacket. Please tell the court about the events of March 15th. Sullivan cleared his throat and sat up straighter. This was his stage, and after 15 years of testifying, he knew exactly how to command a room. Your Honor, I was conducting routine patrol in the Riverside Heights neighborhood around 2 a.m. when I observed the defendant walking between parked cars in a suspicious manner. He gestured toward Amara without making eye contact. This is an upscale residential area where the average home value exceeds $800,000. It's not the kind of place you typically see foot traffic at that hour, especially from individuals who clearly don't reside there. The prosecutor nodded encouragingly. What specifically made her behavior suspicious? Well, she was moving from car to car, looking into windows, checking door handles. Classic casing behavior. I've been on the force for 15 years and you develop instincts about these things. Something about her whole demeanor screamed trouble. Sullivan's voice took on the practiced tone of a seasoned professional. She kept looking over her shoulder, walking in zigzag patterns between vehicles. When she saw my patrol car, she immediately changed direction and started walking faster. Several jurors leaned forward, hanging on every word. This narrative felt familiar, comfortable. The good cop protects their neighborhood from the obvious threat. What was your initial approach, Detective? Standard procedure. I activated my emergency lights and approached on foot. Called out, police, I'd like to speak with you. Nothing threatening, nothing aggressive. Just a routine citizen contact. Sullivan paused, letting his words sink in. That's when her whole attitude changed. She spun around and immediately started yelling. What do you want? I'm not doing anything wrong. You can't harass me. I'm very hostile, very confrontational. The prosecutor walked closer to the jury box. How did you respond to her hostility? I remained completely professional. Explained that I was investigating suspicious activity in the area and needed to see some identification. Basic police work. But she escalated immediately. Sullivan shook his head with practiced disappointment. Started screaming about racial profiling, about how I was only stopping her because she was black. A few jurors exchanged glances. They'd heard these accusations before. It was always the same story. I tried to de-escalate, Sullivan continued, explained that her race had nothing to do with it, that I was simply doing my job. But she kept getting more agitated, started making sudden movements, reaching into her pockets. That's when I became concerned for my safety. The prosecutor retrieved a document from his table. At what point did you decide to search her vehicle? When she started making threats. Said things like, you don't know who you're messing with, and you're going to regret this. Classic intimidation tactics. Combined with her erratic behavior and the late hour, I had reasonable suspicion that she might be under the influence or concealing contraband. Sullivan's eyes lit up as he reached the crucial part of his story. I asked her to step away from the vehicle so I could conduct a brief search for weapons or drugs. That's when she really lost it. Started screaming that I had no right, that she was going to sue me, the whole department. The usual threats. And what did you discover during your search? 2 small plastic bags containing what appeared to be cocaine hidden under the driver's seat. The street value is probably around $500. Enough for distribution charges. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor let the moment hang in the air, allowing the impact to register with the jury. How did the defendant react when you discovered the drugs? Sullivan sighed heavily. Exactly like you'd expect from someone caught red-handed. Started screaming that I planted them, that she was being set up, that she'd never seen those drugs before in her life. The usual sob story that every dealer tells when they get caught. He looked directly at the jury now. Your Honor, in my 15 years of service, I've heard every excuse in the book. They always claim innocence. They always blame the police. It's never their fault. The prosecutor smiled. Detective Sullivan, can you tell the court about your service record with the Metropolitan Police Department? Sullivan's chest puffed out with pride. 15 years of faithful service. 3 commendations for bravery, including one for stopping an armed robbery in progress. 2 community service awards for my work with at-risk youth. I've made over 400 arrests with a conviction rate of 89%. Any disciplinary actions on your record? None whatsoever, sir. Completely clean record. Not even a reprimand. The prosecutor turned to face the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, we have before us a decorated officer with an impeccable 15-year record, someone who has dedicated his life to protecting our community, someone who has risked his life to keep our streets safe. He gestured dismissively toward Amara. And we have someone who was caught red-handed with illegal substances in an area where she had no legitimate business being at 2 a.m., someone who has concocted an elaborate story to avoid taking responsibility for her actions. Sullivan felt the momentum building in his favor. The jury was buying every word. He'd refined this performance over dozens of similar cases, always adjusting, always improving. These people wanted to believe him. They needed to believe that their safe neighborhoods were protected by good cops who caught the bad guys before they could strike. Detective, based on your 15 years of experience, was this arrest completely justified? Absolutely, without question. The defendant was engaging in clearly suspicious behavior in a neighborhood where she obviously didn't belong. She became immediately hostile and threatening when approached. We found illegal drugs in her possession. This is exactly the kind of proactive policing that keeps our communities safe from criminal elements. The prosecutor glanced at his notes one final time. Detective Sullivan, are you absolutely certain about every detail of the sequence of events you've described to this court? Sullivan looked each juror in the eye, his voice ringing with conviction. Your Honor, I swear on my badge, on my 15 years of faithful service to this community, and on the oath I took to protect and serve, every single word I have spoken here today is the absolute unvarnished truth. The courtroom fell silent except for the soft tapping of the court reporter's keys. Sullivan felt a wave of satisfaction wash over him. He'd painted the perfect picture, a dangerous criminal caught by a dedicated officer simply doing his job. But at the defense table, something interesting was happening. Attorney Sarah Carter was writing furiously, occasionally glancing up at Amara, who would give subtle nods or shake her head almost imperceptibly. Carter's pen moved to circle something on her notes, then she underlined it twice, then drew 3 exclamation points beside it. The thick manila envelope sat unopened beside her, bulging with documents that would soon tear Sullivan's carefully crafted story apart, piece by piece. The prosecutor smiled confidently at the jury. No further questions, Your Honor. Ms. Hayes, please take the stand. Amara rose from her chair with the kind of precise, controlled movement that spoke of years of discipline. Her posture was ramrod straight, shoulders squared, eyes forward. As she walked to the witness stand, every step was measured, deliberate. This wasn't the nervous shuffle of someone afraid of being caught in a lie. This was the stride of someone who owned every room she entered. Please state your full name for the record. Amara Elizabeth Hayes. Her voice was clear, steady, with perfect diction. No trace of nervousness. No hint of the street vernacular Sullivan had implied in his testimony. Sarah Carter approached the witness stand. "Ms. Hayes, can you tell the court what you were doing in the Riverside Heights neighborhood on the night of March 15th? Amara's hands rested calmly in her lap. "I was returning from a work assignment that concluded at approximately 1:45 a.m. "What type of work keeps you out until nearly 2 a.m.? There was the slightest pause. Amara's eyes moved briefly to the judge, then back to her attorney. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the specific details of my employment without proper clearance." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor looked up sharply from his notes. This wasn't the answer anyone expected from someone who was supposed to be unemployed and living off government assistance. "Ms. Hayes, can you describe Detective Sullivan's approach that night?" Amara's voice remained perfectly level. Detective Sullivan activated his emergency lights and exited his vehicle. However, his first words were not, "Police, I'd like to speak with you." His exact words were, "What the hell are you doing here?" Several jurors shifted uncomfortably. This was already different from Sullivan's version. He approached aggressively, hand resting on his service weapon. When I asked what I had done wrong, he responded with, "Don't get smart with me." He demanded identification without stating the reason for the stop, which violates standard police procedure outlined in Terry v. Ohio. The prosecutor's pen stopped moving. How did she know case law? "Ms. Hayes, are you familiar with police procedures?" "I have extensive training in law enforcement protocols, constitutional law, and civil rights legislation." Amara's tone remained matter-of-fact, as if this was common knowledge. Sarah Carter nodded. "Please continue with Detective Sullivan's behavior." "He conducted what he called a routine vehicle search without my consent and without probable cause. According to established precedent in Chimel v. California and Arizona v. Gant, such a search requires either consent, a warrant, or exigent circumstances. None were present." The judge leaned forward slightly. In 20 years on the bench, he'd rarely heard defendants speak with such precise legal knowledge. "Did Detective Sullivan follow proper search procedures?" "No. He searched areas of the vehicle not within my immediate control while I was secured in handcuffs. He failed to inventory the contents of the search. Most significantly, he made no attempt to photograph or document the alleged location of the contraband before removing it." Amara's clinical description painted a picture completely different from Sullivan's emotional testimony. Every word was measured, professional, devastating. "Ms. Hayes, Detective Sullivan testified that you became hostile and made threats. How do you respond to that characterization?" "I informed Detective Sullivan that his conduct violated my Fourth Amendment rights and that I would be filing a formal complaint. I used no profanity and made no threats. I simply stated facts regarding police misconduct procedures." The prosecutor objected. "Your Honor, the defendant is not qualified to determine what constitutes police misconduct." Before the judge could rule, Amara spoke quietly. "I'm not at liberty to discuss my qualifications without proper authorization." The courtroom fell silent. There it was again. That mysterious reference to authorization, to clearance, to qualifications she couldn't discuss. Who was this woman? Sarah Carter walked closer to the witness stand. "Ms. Hayes, in your professional opinion, was Detective Sullivan's search conducted properly?" "Objection!" The prosecutor was on his feet. "Professional opinion assumes professional qualifications we haven't established." "Your Honor," Sarah Carter said calmly, "I'd like to request a brief sidebar to discuss my client's background." The judge looked intrigued. "Approach." At the sidebar, voices were hushed but urgent. The prosecutor gestured angrily. Sarah Carter pulled out a document from her jacket, not the manila envelope, but something smaller, official-looking. The judge's eyes widened as he read it. He looked at Amara, then back at the document, then whispered something sharp to both attorneys. When they returned, the prosecutor looked shaken. Sarah Carter appeared satisfied. "Ms. Hayes," the judge said carefully, "I understand there are limitations on what you can discuss regarding your background. Please answer what you can within those constraints." Amara nodded. "Based on my training and experience, Detective Sullivan's search violated multiple constitutional protections and departmental policies. The contraband he claims to have found was not present when I secured my vehicle at 1:50 a.m. "How can you be so certain about the time?" "I maintain detailed logs of my activities for professional reasons. Every movement, every interaction, every timeline is documented." Amara's tone suggested this was routine for her, not the desperate attention to detail of someone planning a crime. Sarah Carter retrieved a folder from the defense table. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Defense Exhibit A detailed activity logs maintained by Ms. Hayes." The prosecutor jumped up. "Objection. These could easily be fabricated after the fact." "Your Honor," Sarah Carter replied, "these logs are maintained according to federal standards and contain information that corroborates other evidence we'll be presenting." Another mysterious reference. Federal standards? Other evidence? The jury was hanging on every word now. "Ms. Hayes, did you plant drugs in your own vehicle?" "No." "Did you make any threats toward Detective Sullivan?" "No." "Did you resist arrest?" "I complied with all lawful orders while clearly stating my constitutional objections for the record." Amara's testimony was devastating in its calm precision. No emotion, no anger, just facts delivered with the kind of authority that comes from years of training in high-stakes situations. "Ms. Hayes, is there anything else the court should know about the events of March 15th? Amara paused, her eyes finding Detective Sullivan across the courtroom. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made everyone lean forward. "Your Honor, Detective Sullivan has no idea who he arrested that night, and very soon, everyone in this courtroom will understand exactly what kind of mistake he made." The prosecutor shot to his feet. "Objection, inflammatory and prejudicial." But the damage was done. The jury was staring at Amara with new eyes. This wasn't the woman Sullivan had described. This was someone with training, with knowledge, with resources they couldn't yet understand. "No further questions," Sarah Carter said, returning to her table where the manila envelope waited, still unopened. As Amara returned to her seat, she moved with the same controlled precision. But now everyone was watching differently. The prosecution's narrative was cracking, and something much bigger was about to emerge. The courtroom had adjourned for the day, but Amara's work was just beginning. Her apartment in downtown D.C. looked ordinary from the outside, just another converted brownstone in a gentrifying neighborhood. But inside, it told a different story. The living room was sparse, functional. No family photos on the mantel, no personal touches that might reveal too much. But there were subtle tells for those who knew how to look. The reinforced door frame, the barely visible security cameras, the way every piece of furniture was positioned to provide clear sight lines to all entrances. Amara sat at her kitchen table with a secure laptop and 3 encrypted phones. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. The trial resumed at 9 a.m. She had less than 10 hours to finalize everything. Her first call was brief, conducted in a language that wasn't English. When she hung up, she immediately dialed another number. "It's Hayes. The cover is compromised, but we can't abort now." Her voice was steady, professional. This wasn't panic. This was operational adjustment. The voice on the other end was calm but concerned. "How compromised?" "Sullivan's attorney is going to push for my employment records tomorrow. The judge already suspects something after today's sidebar. We need to decide how much we're willing to expose." "The operation took 18 months to set up, Hayes. Sullivan's network goes deeper than just him. If we blow your cover now—" "Sir, with respect, Sullivan already blew it when he decided to frame a federal agent." Amara's tone carried just a hint of steel. "The question isn't whether to expose the operation. The question is whether we use this trial to take down just Sullivan or his entire network. A pause. Then, what do you need? Full authorization to declassify my operational records. Not everything, just enough to destroy Sullivan's credibility and protect the larger investigation. Hayes, you understand what you're asking? Your career, your safety? Sir, I've been undercover for 2 years watching this man destroy innocent people's lives. Black women, mostly. Poor women who can't fight back. Women are just like the ones in my family. Her voice never rose, but the emotion was unmistakable. Tomorrow, that stops. You have authorization. Limited declassification only. And Hayes? Yes, sir? Make it count. Amara hung up and opened the laptop. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, accessing files that existed in databases most people didn't know existed. Sullivan's real record appeared on her screen, not the sanitized version the department showed in court, but the truth. 47 complaints over 15 years, 12 involving black women, 7 cases where evidence mysteriously appeared during searches, 3 lawsuits settled quietly by the city, 1 ongoing federal investigation that Sullivan didn't know about, the investigation that had put Amara in his path. She printed everything on high-security paper, each page watermarked with federal authentication codes. The manila envelope Sarah Carter had been carrying was just the beginning. This was the real evidence. 2 years of meticulous documentation proving that Detective Marcus Sullivan was exactly what Amara had suspected when the Bureau first flagged his arrests. Her second phone buzzed. A text message. Package delivered to Carter's office. She knows how to authenticate. Amara smiled for the first time in hours. Sarah Carter had no idea she was defending a federal agent, but she was about to become the prosecutor in the most important civil rights case of her career. The third phone rang. This one she answered in English. Are you safe? The voice was older, female, worried. I'm fine, Mom. I saw the news. That man. What he said about you. Her mother's voice broke slightly. Baby, I know you can't tell me what you really do, but promise me you're going to be okay. Amara looked at the files spread across her table. Tomorrow, she would destroy a corrupt cop's career and potentially save dozens of future victims. But tonight, she was just a daughter reassuring her mother. Mom, remember what Dad used to say about fighting bullies? You don't just fight them for yourself, you fight them for everyone who can't. Tomorrow, that's exactly what I'm going to do. After hanging up, Amara sealed the last document in an evidence envelope. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. In 10 hours, she would walk back into that courtroom and change everything. She set her alarm for 6 a.m., though she knew she wouldn't sleep. Too much adrenaline, too much anticipation. Tomorrow, Detective Marcus Sullivan would learn what happened when you tried to frame the wrong woman. Tomorrow, the hunter will become the hunted. The clock now read 12:23 a.m., 8 hours and 37 minutes until justice. Your Honor, the defense calls its first witness. Sarah Carter stood at her table, the manila envelope finally open. Papers were spread across the surface like a battle plan. We call Mr. David Park, owner of Park Electronics. A nervous Asian man in his 50s approached the witness stand. He kept glancing at Detective Sullivan, who was watching from the gallery with growing unease. Mr. Park, please tell the court about your business. I own Park Electronics on Riverside Avenue, about 2 blocks from where this incident occurred. We sell and install security systems for businesses and high-end residences. Do you have security cameras at your location? Yes, ma'am. Full perimeter coverage, including the street-facing side of my building. Sarah Carter walked to a laptop connected to the courtroom's display system. Mr. Park, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit B. Do you recognize this footage? The large screen filled with black and white security camera footage. The timestamp read 1:52 a.m., March 15th. The image showed a section of Riverside Avenue, clearly capturing the street where Amara's car was parked. Yes, that's from my north-facing camera. It covers the parking area across the street. The prosecutor shot to his feet. Objection! We weren't provided with this evidence during discovery. Your Honor, Sarah Carter replied calmly, Mr. Park only came forward yesterday after seeing Detective Sullivan's testimony on the local news. He was disturbed by what he witnessed and felt compelled to contact our office. The judge looked stern. I'll allow it, but this is highly irregular, Counselor. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Park, can you walk us through what this footage shows? On screen, a figure could be seen walking calmly down the sidewalk. The timestamp showed 1:52 a.m. The person moved with purpose, not the erratic behavior Sullivan had described. That's the defendant walking to her car. You can see she goes directly to the vehicle, unlocks it, and gets inside. No looking in other car windows, no checking door handles. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of the video playing. At 1:54 a.m., a police cruiser appeared on screen, lights flashing. Here's where it gets interesting, Mr. Park continued. Watch what happens next. The footage showed Detective Sullivan exiting his vehicle and approaching Amara's car aggressively. Even without audio, his body language was clearly hostile hand on weapon, aggressive posture. But then Sarah Carter did something unexpected. She clicked a button on the laptop. Sound filled the courtroom. What the hell are you doing here? Sullivan's voice was crystal clear, exactly as Amara had testified. Several jurors gasped. This wasn't the professional approach he'd described under oath. Sir, I'm just going home from work. Is there a problem? Amara's voice was calm, respectful. No hostility whatsoever. Don't get smart with me. Let me see some ID. Now. May I ask why I'm being stopped? I haven't violated any traffic laws or... Because I said so. Women like you need to learn your place. The words hit the courtroom like a physical blow. Women like you. Several jurors looked shocked. The prosecutor's face went pale. But the footage wasn't finished. Sir, I'm cooperating fully. I just want to understand. Shut up and put your hands behind your back. On what charges? I'll find something. I always do with your type. The audio was devastating. Every word Sullivan had sworn under oath was being exposed as a lie. But Sarah Carter wasn't done. Mr. Park, can you tell the court what you observed during the vehicle search? Well, that's the strangest part. Watch this section here. The timestamp jumped to 2:07 a.m. On screen, Amara was already in handcuffs, seated on the curb. Sullivan was in her vehicle conducting his search. You can see Detective Sullivan searching the front seat area, the glove compartment, under the seats. He spends about 4 minutes going through everything. The footage showed Sullivan's methodical search. But at 2:11 a.m., something odd happened. Now watch this. Detective Sullivan walks back to his patrol car and opens the trunk. Clear as day, Sullivan could be seen retrieving a small object from his own vehicle. He walks back to the defendant's car with something in his hand. You can't see exactly what it is from this angle, but... At 2:12 a.m., Sullivan leaned into Amara's car, reaching under the driver's seat area where his hand had been moments before, but now he was placing something, not searching. Then at 2:13 a.m., he discovers the drugs. The courtroom erupted. Shouts of disbelief, gasps of horror. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly, but even he looked shaken by what he'd just witnessed. Order! Order in the court! Detective Sullivan's face had gone from confident to ashen. He was frantically whispering to the prosecutor, who looked like he wanted to disappear. Sarah Carter raised her voice over the chaos. Mr. Park, is there any possibility this footage has been altered or tampered with? No, ma'am. Our system uses blockchain authentication. Every frame is cryptographically signed and time-stamped. It's impossible to alter without detection. The prosecutor was on his feet, but he seemed to have lost his voice. Finally, he managed, Your Honor, we need time to analyze this evidence. Your Honor, Sarah Carter interjected, There's more. She clicked another file on the laptop. A second camera angle appeared, this one from a different business across the street. This is from Martinez Auto Repair, also on Riverside Avenue. Mr. Martinez contacted us this morning after seeing the news coverage. This angle showed the same events from the side, providing an even clearer view of Sullivan planting evidence. The timestamp matched perfectly with the first video. But the most damaging part was still to come. At 2:14 a.m., both cameras captured Sullivan making a phone call. The second camera's audio was clear enough to pick up fragments of his conversation. "Yeah, it's done. Found her with drugs. No, she's clean otherwise. Doesn't matter. No one will believe her anyway." The final words were the most chilling. Another one down. These people need to know their place. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. 12 jurors stared at Detective Sullivan like they'd never seen him before. The prosecutor looked physically ill. Sarah Carter let the moment hang in the air before speaking. "Mr. Park, in your opinion as a business owner who has worked with law enforcement for over 20 years, was this a legitimate arrest?" "Ma'am, what I just showed this court is a federal crime. That man planted evidence on an innocent woman and then lied about it under oath." The judge's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "Mr. Prosecutor, I assume you'll want to review this evidence with your client." But before the prosecutor could respond, Sarah Carter dropped the final bomb. "Your Honor, we have 17 hours of additional footage from 6 different businesses along Riverside Avenue, all showing the same pattern of behavior, all authenticated with blockchain verification, all proving that Detective Sullivan has been systematically framing innocent people for months." Detective Sullivan was no longer just facing perjury charges. He was looking at federal civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and conspiracy charges that could put him away for decades. The hunter had become the hunted, and everyone in that courtroom now knew exactly who the real criminal was. The courtroom was still buzzing from the video evidence when Sarah Carter stood up with a document in her hand. Not from the manila envelope this time, but something else. Something that made Detective Sullivan's lawyer lean forward with obvious concern. "Your Honor, given the severity of what we've just witnessed, my client has authorized me to request a sealed hearing to discuss matters of national security." National security? The words hung in the air like an electric charge. The prosecutor looked confused. The judge looked intrigued and concerned in equal measure. "Counselor, that's a very serious claim. Are you certain you want to proceed down this path?" "Yes, Your Honor. My client has been operating under federal cover for the past 2 years. What Detective Sullivan attempted was not just evidence tampering, it was interference with an ongoing federal investigation." The courtroom erupted again. Federal cover? Investigation? Detective Sullivan's face went from pale to green. He was whispering urgently to his lawyer, who looked like he was getting very bad news. "Approach the bench. All counsel." At the sidebar, Sarah Carter handed the judge a document with official federal seals. The prosecutor tried to read over the judge's shoulder, but the judge quickly covered it. "My God," the judge whispered. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" "Yes, Your Honor. We have authorization from the highest levels to declassify my client's operational status for the purposes of this trial." The judge looked at Amara, sitting calmly at the defense table, then back at the document. "This changes everything. I need to see federal authorization before we proceed." Sarah Carter handed him a second document. The judge read it twice, then looked at the prosecutor. "Counselor, I'm going to give you one opportunity to reconsider your case before we continue." The prosecutor was sweating now. "Your Honor, I don't understand what's happening here. What's happening is that your star witness may have just committed federal crimes against a federal agent. Do you wish to continue with this prosecution?" Before the prosecutor could answer, they returned to their positions. The judge looked out at the packed courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to hear is classified at the federal level. This court is now operating under federal security protocols. Nothing you witness here may be discussed outside this courtroom without written authorization." The tension was unbearable. Every person in the room was leaning forward. "Ms. Hayes, please approach the bench." Amara stood and walked forward with that same controlled precision. But now everyone was watching differently. She wasn't walking like a defendant anymore. She was walking like someone who owned the situation. "Ms. Hayes, you have federal authorization to reveal your operational status?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Please present your credentials to the court." Amara reached into her jacket, the same jacket she'd touched reflexively when Sullivan first insulted her. But this time, instead of a subtle gesture, she withdrew a leather credential case. She opened it and held it up for the judge to see. The judge's eyes widened. He looked at Amara, then at the credentials, then back at Amara. "Would you please state your full name and title for the record?" Amara's voice carried across the silent courtroom with absolute authority. "Special Agent Amara Elizabeth Hayes, Central Intelligence Agency, badge number 47291. I've been conducting an undercover operation targeting police corruption in this jurisdiction for the past 24 months. The silence was deafening. Then chaos. Reporters scrambled for their phones. The gallery erupted in shocked murmurs. Detective Sullivan looked like he was having a heart attack. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a moment, but Amara wasn't finished. "Detective Sullivan has been under federal surveillance as part of Operation Clean Badge, a joint FBI-CIA investigation into systematic civil rights violations by law enforcement personnel. His attempt to frame me was not just criminal, it was an assault on a federal investigation that has already identified 12 other corrupt officers in this department." The prosecutor was frantically shuffling papers, looking for an exit strategy that didn't exist. "Your Honor," Amara continued, "I have been authorized to testify that Detective Sullivan is the primary target of a federal investigation into civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of their constitutional rights under color of law." She turned to look directly at Sullivan, who seemed to be shrinking in his seat. "For 2 years, I have documented his systematic targeting of black women, his evidence planting, his false testimony, and his abuse of power. What happened to me was not random. It was Detective Sullivan's standard operating procedure." The judge was staring at Sullivan with unconcealed disgust. "Detective Sullivan, did you have any idea who you arrested that night?" Sullivan's lawyer was pulling him down, whispering urgently in his ear. But Sullivan seemed beyond hearing. He was staring at Amara like he was seeing a ghost. "You've been hunting me," he finally whispered. Amara's smile was ice cold. "No, Detective Sullivan. I've been hunting all of you." The CIA revelation had shattered any pretense of a routine criminal trial. Now Sarah Carter stood at her table with a thick federal file that hadn't been there that morning. Special Agent Hayes sat calmly, no longer a defendant but a federal witness with the full backing of the United States government. "Your Honor, I'd like to recall Detective Sullivan for cross-examination." Sullivan's lawyer was frantically whispering objections, but Sullivan himself looked defeated. He walked to the witness stand like a man heading to his execution. "Detective Sullivan, you are still under oath," the judge reminded him sternly. "I advise you to consider your answers very carefully." Sarah Carter opened the federal file. "Detective Sullivan, when you testified yesterday, you stated that you had a clean disciplinary record. Is that still your testimony?" Sullivan's lawyer started to object, but Sullivan waved him off. "Yes." "I see." Sarah Carter pulled out a document. "Then perhaps you can explain this internal affairs complaint filed by Keisha Washington on February 3rd, 2023? Sullivan's face went ashen. That complaint was unfounded. Ms. Washington alleged that you planted drugs in her car during a traffic stop in the same neighborhood where you arrested Agent Hayes. Is that correct? The complaint was investigated and dismissed. By whom? Internal Affairs. And who was the investigating officer? Sullivan's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Lieutenant Marcus Thompson. The same Lieutenant Thompson who is also under federal investigation as part of Operation Clean Badge? The prosecutor shot to his feet. Objection! How can this be admissible? Your Honor, Sarah Carter replied, Detective Sullivan opened the door to his disciplinary record when he claimed it was clean. As a federal agent, my client has access to the complete file. The judge nodded grimly. Overruled. Continue. Sarah Carter pulled out another document. Detective Sullivan, are you familiar with LaShonda Davis? I don't recall. She filed a complaint against you on August 15, 2022. Another drug planting allegation. Another dismissal by Lieutenant Thompson. Do you recall now? Sullivan's lawyer was pulling at his arm, but Sullivan seemed paralyzed. What about Destiny Johnson? April 2022. Tamika Brooks? November 2021. Should I continue? Each name hit Sullivan like a physical blow. The jury was watching this systematic destruction with growing horror. Detective Sullivan, how many black women have filed complaints against you in the past 5 years? I don't have an exact number. Sarah Carter held up the file. I do. 47 complaints. 31 from black women. 12 involving alleged evidence planting. All dismissed by Lieutenant Thompson. Would you like to revise your testimony about your clean record? The courtroom was dead silent, except for the sound of papers rustling as Sarah Carter pulled out photograph after photograph. These are the women whose lives you destroyed, Detective Sullivan. Keisha Washington lost her job as a nurse. LaShonda Davis lost custody of her children. Destiny Johnson spent 6 months in jail before her case was dismissed for lack of evidence. She spread the photos across the defense table where everyone could see them. Tamika Brooks, Monica Williams, Jasmine Carter, Angela Thompson, all black women, all targeted by you, all failed by a system that protected you instead of them. Sullivan was staring at the photographs like they were accusers rising from the grave. But here's what you didn't know, Detective Sullivan. Agent Hayes wasn't your only federal target. Sarah Carter pulled out a final document. 3 of these women were federal informants. 2 were undercover DEA agents. You didn't just frame random civilians, you compromised multiple federal investigations. The judge's gavel came down hard. What? Operation Clean Badge identified Detective Sullivan as a threat to federal law enforcement operations 18 months ago. Agent Hayes' assignment was to gather evidence of his systematic civil rights violations. Sarah Carter turned back to Sullivan. You have a pattern, don't you, Detective? Target black women in upscale neighborhoods. Plant evidence. Count on the system to protect you. But what happens when one of those women turns out to be a federal agent with 2 years of evidence against you? Sullivan's lawyer was standing now, trying to stop the questioning, but the damage was complete. Detective Sullivan, when you called Agent Hayes another welfare queen, when you told her that women like you need to learn your place, you were continuing a pattern of behavior that has destroyed dozens of innocent lives. Isn't that correct? Sullivan looked at the photographs of all the women he'd wronged, then at Agent Hayes, sitting calmly at the defense table, then at the jury staring at him with unconcealed disgust. I want a lawyer, he whispered. You have one, the judge replied coldly. But I don't think he can help you now. Sarah Carter gathered her documents. No further questions, Your Honor. But I believe the federal prosecutor's office will have many questions for Detective Sullivan very soon. The pattern was exposed. The victims had names and faces, and justice was finally within reach. The prosecutor stood at his table, shuffling papers with trembling hands. 3 days ago, he'd thought he had an easy conviction. Now he was facing the complete collapse of his case and potential federal charges against his star witness. Your Honor, in light of recent revelations, the state moves to dismiss all charges against the defendant. But Sarah Carter wasn't finished. This wasn't just about Amara anymore. Your Honor, with respect, dismissal isn't enough. The people of this city deserve to hear the truth about what Detective Sullivan has done. They deserve to know how their justice system failed them. The judge nodded grimly. Proceed with closing arguments. Sarah Carter walked to the center of the courtroom, her voice carrying the weight of 2 years of investigation and decades of systemic injustice. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, 3 days ago you walked into this courtroom thinking you were going to hear a simple drug case. A police officer catches a criminal, finds drugs, makes an arrest. Justice served. She gestured toward the evidence table, now covered with federal documents, photographs, and video evidence. Instead, you discovered that you were witnessing something far more sinister. You witnessed the systematic destruction of innocent lives by someone sworn to protect them. The jury hung on every word. This wasn't a closing argument anymore. It was a reckoning. Detective Marcus Sullivan didn't just plant drugs in Agent Hayes' car. He has been planting evidence, filing false reports, and destroying lives for years. 47 complaints, 31 black women, 12 cases of evidence planting, and a system that protected him every step of the way. Sarah Carter pulled out the photographs of Sullivan's victims and placed them where the jury could see. Keisha Washington was a registered nurse with 2 children. She lost her job, her career, her livelihood because Detective Sullivan decided she didn't belong in the neighborhood where she worked night shifts at the hospital. She placed another photograph. LaShonda Davis was driving home from her second job as a house cleaner. She lost custody of her children because Detective Sullivan planted drugs in her car and the system believed him instead of her. Another photograph. Destiny Johnson spent 6 months in jail away from her infant daughter because Detective Sullivan decided that a black woman walking to her car was suspicious. The emotion in the courtroom was palpable. Several jurors were wiping their eyes. Even the judge looked moved. But this case isn't just about Detective Sullivan's victims. It's about a system that enabled him. Lieutenant Thompson dismissed 47 complaints without proper investigation. The prosecutor's office took his word without question. The entire system conspired to protect a corrupt officer at the expense of innocent citizens. Sarah Carter's voice rose with controlled passion. Agent Hayes could have revealed her identity immediately. She could have avoided this trial, avoided the humiliation, avoided having her character destroyed in this courtroom. But she didn't. Do you know why? The courtroom was absolutely silent. Because she knew that if she revealed her federal status right away, Detective Sullivan would walk free. His other victims would never get justice. The system would find a way to protect him, just like it always had. She gestured toward Amara, who sat with quiet dignity. So, Agent Hayes endured Detective Sullivan's racist insults. She sat in this courtroom and listened to him lie under oath. She allowed herself to be painted as a criminal, as a welfare queen, as someone who didn't matter. Sarah Carter's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing everyone to lean forward. She did all of that so you could see the truth. So LaShonda Davis and Keisha Washington and Destiny Johnson and 31 other black women could finally have their day in court. The prosecutor didn't even attempt a closing argument. How could he defend the indefensible? Ladies and gentlemen, your verdict in this case isn't just about Agent Hayes. It's about whether you believe black women deserve justice. It's about whether you believe police officers should be held accountable for their crimes. It's about whether this system works for everyone or just for people like Detective Sullivan. Sarah Carter returned to her table, but she wasn't finished. Before you deliberate, I want you to remember Detective Sullivan's words. Another welfare queen playing victim. Women like you need to learn your place. People like you don't belong here. She paused, letting the words sink in. Those weren't the words of a professional police officer. Those were the words of someone who believes that some people matter more than others. Someone who believes he has the right to decide who belongs where, who deserves justice, who gets to be free. The jury was nodding. They understood. Your verdict today tells Detective Sullivan and every officer like him that their time is over, that the badge doesn't make you above the law, that justice applies to everyone, regardless of color, regardless of class, regardless of power. The jury deliberated for exactly 23 minutes. When they returned, the foreman stood with obvious emotion. In the matter of the state versus Amara Hayes, we find the defendant not guilty on all charges. The courtroom erupted in applause, but the foreman wasn't finished. Your Honor, we also want to state for the record that we believe Detective Sullivan should face federal charges for his crimes against Agent Hayes and all his other victims. The judge banged his gavel, but he was smiling. Ms. Hayes, you are free to go. Detective Sullivan, you are remanded into federal custody pending charges for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and perjury. As federal marshals led Sullivan away in handcuffs, he looked back at Amara one last time. She met his gaze with calm satisfaction. Justice delayed is justice denied. But sometimes, justice comes exactly when it's supposed to. 6 months later, the headlines told the full story. Corrupt detective sentenced to 8 years federal prison. 23 wrongful convictions overturned in police corruption scandal. CIA agents' undercover operation exposes systematic civil rights violations. Detective Marcus Sullivan sat in a federal prison cell, his badge permanently stripped, his pension forfeited. The man who once believed he could destroy lives with impunity now spent his days in the same system he had fed with innocent victims. But Sullivan wasn't alone. Operation Clean Badge had expanded beyond anyone's expectations. Lieutenant Thompson received 6 years for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. 3 other officers were indicted for similar evidence-planting schemes. The entire Metropolitan Police Department was placed under federal oversight. For Keisha Washington, the nurse who lost her career, justice meant more than vindication. The city paid her $1.2 million in damages. She enrolled in law school, determined to fight for others who couldn't fight for themselves. LaShonda Davis got her children back and started a nonprofit organization for families destroyed by police corruption. Nobody should have to choose between believing a badge and believing the truth, she told reporters. Destiny Johnson became a police accountability activist, working with federal investigators to identify other corrupt officers. Her 6 months in jail had transformed her into a voice for the voiceless. Agent Amara Hayes received the Intelligence Star, the CIA's highest honor for courage. But she didn't return to undercover work. Instead, she accepted a position training new agents in civil rights law and ethical investigations. She also did something unexpected. She started speaking at police academies across the country. Every badge carries the weight of public trust, she would tell new recruits. That trust isn't given to you because you're special. It's given to you because people believe you'll protect the innocent, not prey on them. Her story became a case study in federal law enforcement academies. How an undercover agent spent 2 years building an airtight case against systematic corruption. How she endured personal humiliation to serve a greater purpose. How one person's courage could expose decades of injustice. But perhaps the most powerful change was in the community itself. Citizens began demanding body cameras, independent oversight, and transparency in police investigations. The Sullivan Standard became a term used to describe the kind of aggressive accountability that communities expected from their law enforcement. Young black women started carrying recording devices, knowing that their word alone might not be enough. They organized Know Your Rights workshops and legal defense funds. They turned victimization into empowerment. The case showed America something profound, that justice isn't guaranteed, but it's possible, that corruption thrives in darkness but crumbles under scrutiny, that sometimes the person you underestimate the most is exactly the person who will hold you accountable. Agent Hayes put it best in her final interview. Everyone deserves to be judged by their character, not their appearance. But when people choose to judge by appearance, they better be prepared for the consequences. Your voice matters. Your story matters. When you witness injustice, speak up. When you see corruption, expose it. When you encounter someone being underestimated because of how they look, remember Amara Hayes. Share this story if it moved you. Subscribe to Black Voices Uncut if you want to see more stories of courage triumphing over corruption. And tell us in the comments, what would you do if you witnessed injustice? How far would you go to fight for what's right? Because the next time someone tries to judge you by your appearance, they might just discover they picked the wrong person to underestimate.
The story you heard today wasn't cleaned up. It was told exactly as it happened. At Black Voices Uncut, we believe that's the only way truth can live. If you felt something, hit like, comment, and your reaction, and subscribe. Every week, we bring you voices that refuse to be silenced.